Hello everybody, it's Wheel Trouble, welcome back, and if you haven't already, just start out by hitting like, subscribe if you haven't, and share this with your friends. It's the best way to get my name out there, and I tried to avoid making this video. I don't know how else to say it, but it is an appropriate start for the reality check portion of my channel, and I work very hard to try to keep this channel apolitical, but I'm going to be blunt. This is a politically charged topic, and I'll try to be as proactive with it as possible. As you can see from the footage, this is actually my trip up Pike's Peak. So what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about the loss of riding areas. And I'm not apologizing to any of you with parks and recs that happen to be responsible for the Pike's Peak area. Not apologizing for this rather comical video, but this footage could have been prevented. And on that note, let's get this started. There's a lot of high-profile areas that were under threat in the past, such as Laguna Seca, Lake Elsinore, Tellico Off-Road Area, Anderson Creek OHV in Georgia, tons of drag strips, Pike's Peak, as you can see from the footage again. This is fortunately temporary, so these guys kind of somewhat almost get a pass in my book on this, and it's closed to motorists as well. It's not just a motorcycle thing. The Trans-American Trail is also another one that, through no fault of its own, typically ends up with a lot of temporary closures, mostly weather-related. There's a few where they'll have permanent closures due to issues where people purchase land and decide they don't want to be motorcycle-friendly because the motorcyclists are either jerks, or it's just weird having strangers running across your yard on motorcycles. I can understand that too. So, again, not all of these are really hard, fast, people being mean. Sometimes it's actually completely understandable. And some closures are also environmental, so wildlife areas where you have an endangered species versus inattentive riders. That is a problem. Now, as a rider, yes, typically if I hit something, like, say, a buffalo, the buffalo is going to win. There's no two ways about it. I'm going to be the one in the hospital. The buffalo will have my head on a platter. This is just the way it is. You can be taken out permanently by a 9-pound bird. So it is what it is, but we also don't want to harm the wildlife, so we have to be conscious of that, and that will actually cause riding areas to close as they have to find ways to protect these animals. Also, there's acts of nature, so flooding, washed out areas, erosion that makes things absolutely dangerous, or like this year in Colorado where Engineers Pass was closed due to snow till clear into July. It was nuts. So that can cause closures as well. Those, there's not a lot of control over. Not too much anyway. The wildlife somewhat, but even then, that's kind of a gray area. But some of these are man-made. So, noise issues, trash, improper trail maintenance, riding in non-approved areas. That would be those of us who break through fenced areas, ride on people's lands without permission, things like that. That's not a good thing. Injuries that result in lawsuits, or inactivity where the government just can't see any reason to spend money on land that nobody's using. That's a waste of taxpayer money, and so those all make sense too. Noise, we can do something about. That's actually kind of where the two-stroke thing came about, where they started deadening the sound on those because two-strokes were really loud. Still miss them. Loud bikes don't really save lives either. We'll get into that in a different video. Trash, that's another thing. I'm fortunate to live in an area where the riders do take care of things, and every time I've gone to the trails, they tend to be fairly clean, and they make no qualms about saying, pack it in, you pack it out. So, be conscious of that. If you're littering a lot, first off, you're going to chase people off the riding area from it being just trash. But then also, city officials and government officials will look at that, and it puts our sport in a negative light. Trespassing, that one's kind of it's an issue I don't really see that need to go into. We should all pretty much universally agree that we should only ride where we're welcome. And that actually kind of brings us to the injury lawsuits. You're required to sign a waiver for everywhere you ride, but that doesn't stop people from disregarding the waiver and trying to sue, and the insurance companies typically will pay out because it's cheaper than fighting in court forever. And because of that, it's very common for a lot of riding areas to get shut down that way. Also, we discussed the inactivity, and I can actually appreciate that one. If you've got a riding area that nobody's actually riding on, then yeah, let's stop wasting tax money on it. So, easiest way to solve that, get out there and ride. So what can riders actually do for a lot of this? First and foremost, and the easiest for us to do as participants in this sport, is just don't be a dick. You get a lot more flies with honey than vinegar, and you never really want to chase people out of the sport. That only kills it. Squids are notorious for this, where they'll judge people based on the bike they ride, the brand they ride, the clothes they wear, whatever. Look, be friendly, bring people into the sport. We recently, at one of our local motocross tracks, they did this thing called the Mother of All Blowouts, where they did everything from those little Power Wheel Barbie races down a hill to actual races to a Cajun cookout, all in one massive fun-filled weekend just to bring people into the sport. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful idea. And I really appreciate it when local tracks and riding areas do things like that. And another thing you can do is work with government agencies. And while, yes, I'm poking fun at the government agencies responsible for the Pike's Peak thing, I'm only poking fun, and that's how I mean this. They're doing the best they can with the hand they were dealt, I'm sure. And as was the case with one of my local off-road areas, the city was actually willing to hand off responsibility to a local nonprofit. They wouldn't have done so if the nonprofit had been hostile about it all. It's easy to get mad, but it's not productive. Instead, ask what went wrong with it, and then ask how you as a rider can fix it. Sometimes it's as simple as just taking responsibility and picking up where the government left off, and that's fine. And support our lobbyists. I know lobbyists get a bad rap, especially here in the States, but there's a reason that they exist, and it just so happens that motorcycling is one such sport where we have a great lobby. In America, we have the American Motorcyclist Association. Get involved. Motorcycling is about community. Governments, like them or not, are also about community. Because of this, it's a mutual language that can be used to break down the barriers. The best ones at that are going to be the lobbyists. Do you think a city official who rides is going to want to close this riding area? Hell no. So, also to that end, spread the gospel of BRAP. Government agencies are most likely going to shut down things that have no intrinsic communal value. So the first thing and the most important thing we can do for our sport is make it valuable, make it a community event. So I'll go ahead and take this step off my soapbox, and again, like, subscribe, share. I think this is definitely something that as a rider is near and dear to my heart, and I hope it's near and dear to any veteran rider out there. So catch you guys later. Wheel Trouble out.